What's up, everybody? Andre here, as usual. Probably gonna be the only person ever here. but I'm here with another video, another Q&A with Dre. But this one's gonna be slightly different. I guess not really, but the topic that I plan to touch upon is Bally Turner related, but not like what can we expect in the future, etc., etc. The game's not even out yet, so there's not too much to talk about in regards to it. But there is a question that I do want to answer that has been asked to me a lot, and it's why a fighting game? Out of all the games that you could have made for a card game, you decided to make a fighting game. And what were the challenges behind making a game like Bally Turner, or still making a game like Bally Turner? Because the game's not technically made, it hasn't even been put in the hands of the public to sit in their bedrooms or wherever you guys keep your card games. So I just want to tackle that question real quick because I feel it's a very good question. So why I chose a fighting game? Since the inception of Andre, me, since I was born, yeah, we had our Super Marios and everything like that, but the games that I really gravitated towards as a kid was fighting games. And I always aspired to make games in any shape or form. Of course, the end goal is to get like a video game out there on an Xbox, a PlayStation, Nintendo, whatever, right? But since I was a kid, I grew up with fighting games, and I always loved the challenge of playing my older brother, playing family members like my cousins or my dad, who would just try and be a dad and just play with his sons. And eventually that translated into going to arcades. It used to be called Sega City. It's now called Palladium, to which I heard is closed down. But from there, I carried it on to high school. And when I went to Francis Xavier, is where I met an old friend named Ray and Herbert, and they kind of opened the world for me and my brother into what competitive gaming really is. Because my brother and I, we were like heavy casuals. But when we met these guys and they showed us this new layer of fighting games, we immediately fell in love. And the game that I fell in love with, that I can say that I have wholeheartedly fallen in love with since hitting high school. I'm 29 now, so So since hitting grade 9, and yeah, everyone will say Street Fighter or King of Fighters or Marvel versus Capcom versus SNK. I played all those, by the way, but the game that got me in love with the genre of fighting is Guilty Gear. Anybody that knows me should have known I was going to say that before I even got to this point. But Guilty Gear has been the game that I have truly fallen in love with. The first Guilty Gear game I ever played was actually Guilty Gear Isuka. I remember I went to, I think it was called Cash Converters at the time. We went to a Cash Converters, my brother and I, and we just saw this game. And, there were 4 people on the back of the cover, well, 4 characters on one map. So 2-on-2 fights. My brother and I, we always had this thing with teaming up and taking on challenges together and overcoming together, etc., etc. So I thought Isuka was a no-brainer. Buy a fighting game, 4 people on one map. Me and my brother can just beat up bots all day. Let's do it. And so when I played Guilty Gear Asuka and I met Ray, and I was like, yeah, we play a game called Guilty Gear. And he's like, Guilty Gear? Because at the time, that was a very, that was a well-kept secret. If you knew Guilty Gear, it was because you were into the scene of fighting games. Like, you're not no casual, what fighting games do you play? Street Fighter. Everybody played Street Fighter. Even if they're not a gamer, they know what a Ryu and Ken is. They know what a Hadouken is, right? But nobody knows what a Gunflame is, or a Grand Viper, or a Stun Edge. Like, nobody knew that stuff. So, to their surprise, they're like, these 2 new kids in our school, they play Guilty Gear. Well, not kids. Jamal's the same age as them. I'm like 2 years younger, but you get what I'm saying. These newbies know Guilty Gear. That's crazy. And they showed us Guilty Gear Reloaded, and then from there it was just, we weren't used to single combat. We weren't used to even playing fighting games properly. But these guys showed us the ropes and whatnot, and as much as we don't talk anymore, I'm forever grateful for the moments we had playing these games, because they defined my life today. And had I not met Ray and Herbert, I doubt that I would even have gone to a professional level of fighting games. I've participated in fighting game tournaments with Melty Blood, Guilty Gear, Soul Calibur 3. I think it was Tekken 5 when Lars made his debut. I played the Tekken where Lars first came about. I think that's Tekken 5. What other fighting games did I play? CVS 2. I played it. I wasn't good at it, but I played it. CVS 2, Naruto Shippuden, Ultimate Ninja XL 2. What else? I can go on the list, but I don't want to go down like this long list of BS. Sengoku Basara, Hokuto no Ken. That game was ridiculous, by the way. Yeah, I think just all of those, really. I could name more, but you get it. I'm a pioneer in this stuff. So I played all these fighting games and I competed in them, and I just fell more and more in love with how passionate the community is, and seeing how people get together. You know, this was before esports or Evo or anything like that was like a huge thing. This was still around the era where people made fun of people like me for trying to make a living out of video games. So around that time, we were all clustered in basements. I remember going to Ray's basement so many times. You'd swear we'd have a fire hazard down there with the amount of people that were in his basement, and then people in my grandma's basement when my brother and I would host events, and then people in Brett's basement that we called the Brett Cave. And, you know, we'd all just drive from different parts of the city. You know, people come from Mississauga, Hamilton, Waterloo, Scarborough, Brampton. You know, we're all coming from all these different parts of Toronto, Mississauga, blah, 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 just to gather in this one little congested basement and just play fighting games. And we'd have this camera like I have right now, this camera propped up and staring at a box TV of us just mashing our sticks. And me, I just played on pad, but mashing sticks and mashing pads together. Pads is like controllers together, and just going at it and just playing. And it was just, there was something about that community and that camaraderie that just made me feel like I found my place in the world. So fighting games has always had a special place in my heart. And I honestly feel, out of all the games in the world, the most rewarding, most difficult, and most appealing game to play is a fighting game. I truly believe that in my heart of hearts. There is no game more competitive than a fighting game. And I have a very competitive nature. I did boxing since I was 7, and I now do it on my off time. But I've been doing boxing since I was 7 years old, and you know, I study martial arts and whatnot. I'm not saying like I study kung fu or anything like that. What I mean is I watch MMA fights. I study jiu-jitsu a little bit, kickboxing a little bit, but I know boxing. But, you know, another day. So it just appealed to me watching this, and I always told myself, ever since I was a kid, you can ask my father, you can ask my mother, you can ask my aunts, my cousins, my brother, prime example, even some of my teachers. I mean, I was always a distracted child. I was always living in my head, and I was never on this planet per se. When I sat in classes or when I came home to do anything, I usually have this marker or these pencil crayons. I have something in my hand that isn't supposed to be a toy, but in my head, what I'm holding in my hands right now is a character in my head, and I'm twirling it and spinning it and making all these sound effects. I'm playing, right? And I'm envisioning this world in my head, in the palm of my hands. These characters, these abilities. Even now, when I make Battle Eterna, when I'm working on it, or any idea in my head, I have this marker that I hold on to, and I envision the thoughts in my head and translate them. The marker is just an instrument that I use to get a grasp on my imagination, per se. And yeah, I'm 29 years old, and I still have these childish tendencies, but they help me create what I am creating today. And even now, I often find myself living in my head, like, you know, my fiance is off at work or something, and they'd ask me, what were you doing at home all day? And it's just like, I was just coming up with ideas. I sit in my bedroom long periods of time. When I'm by myself, I usually am in another world, just playing around in my head, figuring things out, getting ideas out, thinking about how to make the next game, etc., 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 etc. So, fighting games, since I was a kid, I was writing these little shitty, very bad comics. Very bad. They were poorly drawn. I can't draw to save my life. They were poorly drawn, and I put substance into them, like a story and, all that stuff. And I always thought to myself, if only I could make a fighting game. Because I really wanted to make a fighting game. I really wanted to make a game, and I want it to be a fighting game because I want people to come together for Battle Eterna the same way I see people come together for Street Fighter, Guilty Gear, Melty Blood, CVS2. We need a 3, by the way. All that stuff. Just to see people get together and just play these games in such a competitive but respectful nature. And sometimes, yeah, it does get tense. It does get tense, but that's a part. You're not competing if you don't get passionate about it, in my opinion. So there are people out there who get very passionate, and then there are people out there who are just there to, just have a good time, practice some combos. It's like a sport almost. People spend. I'm personal. I'm a living representation of this. Me, my brother, my friends that I call my brothers can even vouch for this. We would spend like hours on end sitting in training mode, practicing combos, simulating how to get those combos to work in actual situations. And should we be on this side of the screen, in the middle of the screen? Should it be ground versus air, air versus ground? If I start on the left side, if I start on the right side, if he's in the corner, how do I get him to the corner? Damage calculations. Like, we are studying this game. Frame rate data. Am I in the positives? Am I in the negatives? If I hit him while he's blocking, do I have an advantage? Am I at a disadvantage? Like, we are studying this game to know the ins and outs of our character. And then we study their matchups to learn how we can face other characters that would just stomp the character that we're playing. So, all that goes into playing a fighting game at a higher class level. And just seeing people sit there and brainstorm and come up with ideas, new ways to attack, new ways to defend, new ways to set up. It's very inspiring to be involved in that world. And I had the privilege of being involved in that world and meeting like-minded people like Ray, like Herbert, being born and raised with my brother, like Brett, like Isaac. These are all guys that help mold the gamer immortal in the fighting game industry. So, and I was very thankful to grow up around those guys. Even Adnan. I mean, he and we don't talk much, and I really don't enjoy the game Super Smash Brothers. But when I played it for the period of time, he was a very great mentor to have and guide me through whatever. So, like, I was very fortunate to be raised around these people and to see what fighting games can really do, because it brings people together, you know, and that's what I want Battle Eterna to do. So when I was thinking about making a game, of course the first game I ever wanted to make was a fighting game. The problem is I don't know how to program, and I don't know how to draw, and the stories I write at best are probably mediocre, but I knew how to make a game. I just needed the opportunity to do so. And so for a couple of years throughout my high school life, I was trying to find my place in life. Like, I don't know, maybe I'll write comic books, and then I started this Creed Comics thing, or maybe I'll find a way to get my stories and to get my vision out there with the hopes that it'll become popular enough that it can transition into a game. That didn't work out too well. So I just said, you know what, forget it. I'm going to make a game myself. And along came Battle Eterna. We brainstormed some ideas, my brother, myself, and another brother of mine named CK. We sat down in my grandma's basement. We went over a whole bunch of games. I believe the first game that we were going to make was an RTS, because I just had the idea of an RTS in my head, because at the same time I didn't know how I was going to make a fighting game with cards. I didn't know how. And when I studied other fighting games out there and took a look at how they make their fighting games, it didn't feel like it was true to the genre of what a fighting game should be. It felt more like a card game, which, yes, they are card games, but I didn't like that. I wanted to make a fighting game with cards, not a card game that has fighting elements, if you get what I mean. So I was looking at a whole bunch of card games that are considered fighting games, and I didn't like what I saw simply because I felt like it was more about the deck and less about the player. And I wanted to make this game entirely about the player, just like a fighting game, where certain skills do certain things, whatever. I know we don't have to worry about a stage right now, but in future games that I plan to produce, I will aim to top what I have done. And Battle Eterna is a big thing for me. So it'll be hard to overcome, but not impossible. The only thing that hinders a person from moving forward is their lack of motivation and their lack of imagination. Thankfully, I was born with both. So the intention with Battle Eterna was to make the perfect fighting game, to get into a competitive scene, because I fell in love with the competitive scene. When everyone asks me, why do you want to be competitive? Yeah, it's going to have casual elements, for sure. There'll be casual elements in the game where you can just sit down and party with your friends. We're going to have modes where you can do that. But I'm so fixated on the competitive aspect because I see what the competitive gaming community does, especially in fighting games. The passion from the players, the passion from the commentators, the passion from the fans, the passion from the community. And being as this is a game that you're not just going to sit down and play online, like it brings you back to that old school feel where you all got to get together in somebody's house and play together and study each other, learn each other's mindsets and how they play these characters, and etc., etc. Like a real fighting game. You know, you're figuring out your opponent in ways that you can beat him. So I chose to make a fighting game because I was raised off of it. I fell in love with its genre, and it was a huge challenge to make. It was. When I made my RTS game, that is not done at all, but when I was working on an RTS, I was always in my head trying to figure out how I can make a fighting game make sense, and I just couldn't at the time. Probably 3 years later, 4 years, 5, couple years ago, I finally figured out this formula, and I started applying it, and I started tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it. And then when I went to Anime North, and then when I went to YetiCon, and then when we sat down and people played this game at EGLX, and people played this game, and they literally pulled out their wallets. I kid you not, they've literally pulled out their wallets, asked how much It is to buy 2 characters so that they and their friend can play. They want to take it home. They like the game. I've had people literally sit down at the table, spitball ideas with me, tell me about the potential of the game. When's it coming out? I still have people to this day waiting for me to get this thing out there because they've been waiting that long. The game has them that excited. And I don't blame you guys if you lost hope, but I thank you guys for still sticking around. And just seeing that just reminded me of the passion that fans have for fighting games. It just reminded me all over again. Like, they played this game, and the number one compliment I've always gotten about this game, and I take great pride in it, very great pride in it, is I've never played a game like this. Which means I have created something unique. Never before seen, so it's hard to pass up on a unique experience. And it tells me that I did a very damn good job at least presenting something that's not on the market. And I owe that to the competitive environment that I grew up in, playing fighting games. I owe that to my love for Guilty Gear. I owe that to the friends I grew up around who introduced me to this world. I owe that to my older brother Jamal. I owe that to Herbert, Ray, Brett, Isaac, Adnan, anybody else that I'm forgetting, Dice. I owe that to all those guys who introduced me to that world and just, became rivals, became friends, just became a part, just introduced me and welcomed me into that community. Because without that, I probably wouldn't be making this video right now, because I wouldn't know what I'd be doing with myself. I'd probably be doing something that I didn't want to do, like boxing or making music or something. This is what I want to do. So I'm very happy and I'm very grateful, and I feel obligated to make this game work. All those years of living in that environment, I should know what I'm doing by now to make a game like this work. And Guilty Gear has always been my number one inspiration when it comes to making these games, because I think it's the perfect fighting game. I know they're simplifying it a little bit, but it's still the perfect fighting game in my opinion. Remember, I grew up around the Reloaded time, so I know what Accent Core is. I'll just say that. I know what Accent Core is. But, yeah, so why a fighting game? It's simply just because of that. Fighting games are challenging to make, but they're rewarding when they take off. They're very rewarding. And I want people to come together and love Battle Eterna and resonate with the characters and really, compete, have that competitive nature, that competitive drive. At Anime North, I've seen friends face each other and they're like, oh, if I know you, you'd be going big, and then no, and then they have all these reactions, and when somebody wins, they literally throw their hands up in the air like it was just a casual test, but it was so competitive to them that failure was not an option. And those are the moments that I want to capture in this game. And I understand it's a card game, and I understand a lot of people are like, your competitors are going to be Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, these guys have big scenes, but they don't have anything like Battle Eterna, so I'm not really that worried about it. I won't be competing to have the same fan base as them. I'll just be competing to get the same exposure as them. But I'm not taking away from them. I'm not directly competing with them, because I'm not doing their genre of deck versus deck. I'm doing player versus player. And it's a fighting game, and it plays like a fighting game. So I'm not entirely worried about that. But the fact that people are saying that's my competition is already rewarding enough. Battle Eterna is being brought up in the same conversation as Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon. I have to be doing something right. This whole team has to be doing something right. So, yeah. I chose fighting games for these reasons. And, I intend, the day Battle Eterna becomes bigger than I could ever imagine, I intend to host my own tournaments and have people come by and play for like a real reward, not like a plush toy. I mean like money rewards and whatnot, exclusive cards and etc. etc. Update the game, update the story of the game, get people immersed in the world, get people immersed with the characters, and there's such big plans for the game in the future after it's released. Right now, we just want to get the gameplay out there, working in the hands of people, and just get it into a competitive nature, get people really involved in Ballyturna. So that's why I chose a fighting game. 25 minutes later. But that's why I chose a fighting game. And I understand there's going to be a lot of trial and error with a game that's as unique as Ballyturna, but I'm willing to go through that. And, just work hard at it, get it together, and get it into your hands as soon as I possibly can, and keep it in your hands for as long as I possibly can with new characters, new seasons, and whatever. Is this what I'll be gearing my whole gaming operations towards? Maybe. I mean, I have ideas in my head and unreleased ideas on my laptop. I've always told myself I wanted to release like 3 fighting games that are different from each other. Other than that, racing games, RTS games, stuff like that. I want to make as many games as possible, so I can go down, because my goal is to be one of the best game developers out there. I mean, who wouldn't want to be the best in the field that they're in? I'm not saying to be goated, but I am saying to be in the conversation of one of the best to ever make games. And that's what I'm aiming for. And Ballyturna is definitely a great foot forward towards the door. So, yeah, that only one question that I'm answering today, because 27 minutes in, at this point it may as well become a podcast. But yeah, so that's why I chose fighting games, and that's why I'm so in love with fighting games, and that's why I will continue to make Ballyturna work. To pay respects to the community, to pay respects to my life, because I geared all of my teenage years to competitive play, to prove to myself that this is my calling, and and to be the definition of there's no such thing as an ungifted person. As bizarre as it may sound, to try and make a living out of making games, I mean, anything's possible if you're passionate about it. And I will be the proof of that, and inspire other people to do what it is that they want to do. Other than that, the next Q&A that I will be doing, I will be talking about other things, but for now, I'm just talking about this. Why fighting games? This is why. So, I'm going to leave you with that. I've been trying to close since 25 minutes, so I think we should close now. This is a good place to close at. I will be uploading more videos, of course, and all that other good stuff. So please like, share, subscribe, do all that social media beautiful stuff for me. And, any help is appreciated. Like the video if you like the video, because it helps with the YouTube algorithms and whatnot. So, I do appreciate everyone who has been following. I do appreciate everyone who has been supporting. I do apologize that it is taking some time. We did intend to launch this year's Anime North COVID game, and, things happen. But the momentum, we're picking it back up, moving forward. So I'm very confident that it'll be here sooner than you expect. I appreciate your patience. I appreciate your continued support. I appreciate your attention, because your attention is what makes all of this exist. So I appreciate the fact that you are still attentive when I make a video, and you're still looking, viewing, to the few of you who share it. I love you guys for sharing it. and I'm going to do my best not to let you guys down and bring forward one of the best games that have been made in recent times. I'm Andre Walford, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.